Hey, Alana and Jeff, can you hear me?
Hi there. Yes, I can.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
good.
can hear you.
Good to see you. Thank you, guys.
Good to see you.
Keith is running a few minutes late, and so it looks like we'll be about 5 minutes late.
Great. Not a problem at all.
And right now, I don't see Tina here, but oh, she is with Molly. Okay, good. Okay, good. So if you can get a cup of coffee, I apologize for.
Great. No worries.
Good. And Alana, do you see that note this morning?
I did. Yes. Yes. And I will follow up on that. Thank you very
Okay.
much for that. Those leads. I appreciate it.
I'll tell you, Jen Cervenka is a rock star. So if that can work, that's great.
Great. Thank you for the suggestions.
Good. 5 minutes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Durham Town Council to order. It is 10:35 on January 27th. Thank you.
You have such power.
I know. Did you feel the earth move there?
Before you got in, I said to Jeff and Alana that so which is
Great.
So they're in theory around. Hey, Molly.
Molly and Tina, whenever you're ready. Sit over here. It's just this. We have this.
We're incredibly relaxed. So
and we have this legacy table, series of tables here.
but
You
to,
do.
unfortunately,
Fantastic.
to take these away and all of us sit there, it takes like 5 minutes to get the microphones unwound.
Yes, exactly.
It's-
So,
takes-
just to kind of bring everyone here and who might be watching or will watch in the future up to speed. I believe at the end of the day, we're quite fortunate to have new state representative for Block Island and Tina Spears, and to be included in a new Senate district with Senator Alana DeMario. And I wanted to start this meeting by saying something that I've said to you privately, and that is to you both privately, and that is I could not be more impressed and pleased with how engaged the two of you have been and how willing you've been to hear what the issues are here on the island. And I'm really excited for the town to have you and to be working with you both. Our challenges are many. We are, as Martha said in a meeting yesterday, we are definitely in a lot of cases a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And both of you have clearly understood that from the first day that we met you. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. So I don't know how you'd both would like to start. By the way, Senator, congratulations on your appointment as the Senate Chair of Environment. Yeah.
She can see.
You can see. So the camera's over there.
That's
Yep.
why we put you
Yeah.
Nope, that's totally fine. I understand you might be looking in a different direction, but thank you. Thank you very much.
So I don't know if you'd like to start just sort of either of you, whichever way, just sort of perhaps how things are going thus far, and then we can get into particular issues. We've got a range of things we'd like to talk about. So,
Senator, do you want to go first or would you like me to start?
Nope, you go right ahead. Since you're there in the room, I'll defer to you first.
Okay, great. So I don't have much to report on what's happening at a state level in regards to how that might impact Block Island. But what I can tell you is the governor's budget has been released. I've done a high level review of it. I have not looked at it in great detail to see how it would impact Block Island, but by and large part, there's not any significant investments for you in a municipal way or in an education way. I don't see resources allocated for that purpose. But I will take a closer look. The House fiscal staff is diving into the budget. We'll get more of a preview and I'll get specific answers for my district. The House hasn't established a committee structure yet. So fortunately the Senate has, and we have the great honor of having Senator DeMario be the chair of the Environmental Committee in the Senate, which is extraordinary. I don't know what my committees will be to know what my assignments will be and where I
got
could be.
any appointments? Yep.
Not yet, no, and no representatives have. But what I can tell you is all of the areas that you guys have identified to me thus far, I've been actively engaging with some stakeholders on environmental issues, some municipal issues, education aid. So I'm doing kind of the background work to learn more about how I can interface and work on your behalf. But really why I'm here today is to really learn from you. What are some of your priorities? Where are your lead priorities, meaning top three in areas that I can be supportive, so I can really convey those to my colleagues up in the House and work with Senator DeMario to get it done.
Wonderful. Thank you. Senator, do you have any priorities on the Environment Committee or in your district?
How much time do we have this morning? So as Representative Spears mentioned, we have received our committee assignments. I will be the chair of the Environment and Agriculture Committee. I will also continue to serve on Health and Human Services, as that is another area of interest of mine in terms of pursuing policy, especially in the areas of healthcare access, specifically mental health care access and workforce development. It's very similar to Tina. I've just really been spending the last couple of weeks hearing from the municipalities in my district about their priorities. I definitely see today more as an opportunity for me to hear from you all, and just to also just share that kind of logistical timeline that for legislation in terms of being able to get it drafted and get it going. We do have a short session. We are a part-time legislature, so we're kind of on this time frame, whereas you folks all work year round. We're on that January to June time frame, and I'm probably looking at a mid to late February drafting deadline. So if there are pieces of legislation that need to go in priorities for your town, this is definitely the time to be organizing and talking about that. That being said, if there are municipal needs, sometimes there is some exception to that, but there's no guarantee.
Sure.
So I'm very happy to be able to kind of have this conversation early before things really speed up and hopefully be able to have that time to get to the things that you guys need. So I'm here to listen.
Wonderful. Thank you. Why don't we start with a piece of legislation that we saw last year that, thank you, Senator, passed the Senate unanimously and then never received action in the House. And that is a bill that would have enabled us as a town to look at and change our property tax structure. And I think we've spoken with each of you about this either together or separately, but I thought it would be worthwhile. Sven Riesem was really our point person on it, along with Amy Land, our finance director. And I thought it would be worthwhile if they're up for it, just to sort of walk you through kind of what we're looking at, what the background was last session. And we definitely want to pursue what is essentially an opportunity to have a conversation in the community about what our tax structure looks like. And that obviously is, as the senator knows, as you'll come to know, Tina, it's not unique to Block Island. I think roughly half the towns in the state have some sort of flexibility, but we need the legislature's permission in order to engage in that.
Thanks, Keith. So I'm going to do the ultimate political move, and that is to introduce Amy Land, our finance director. But I will say that both of your participation in this effort is really, really important. And once Amy sort of goes over, and the goal would be, why are we talking about this? Who else?
I think the camera froze. Alana, does it look like it on your end? Okay. Yeah.
Hold on a second. Did we lose them?
You guys are back. You froze for a second, but now I can hear and see you moving.
Great.
We'll talk about broadband infrastructure funding in a minute, Senator.
This is really about putting in place the flexibility that the town needs in order to adopt a structure that is more appropriately reflective of the costs and the burdens of running Block Island and making sure that we're keeping it affordable for our year-round residents. And the current structure doesn't allow us to do that. And so we're really looking for that flexibility to make those decisions here at a local level. I don't know, Sven, if you'd add anything to that?
Yeah, and we'll come to both of you in the next weeks or month really around the details of it. But it's, when we introduced it last year, I think it's pretty well flushed out. Obviously, there's some editing to go about it, but the goal is really, as Amy mentioned, about burden and also in helping the island from a cultural point of view. So unlike many communities, one of the things that we stress here a lot is year-round housing. And that year-round housing, whether it's a full rental or it's an apartment, as you two will get to know more, we have a number of programs for affordable housing or mother-in-law suite, et cetera. But this is really about helping people who are trying to rent a room or rent a house for people to be here year round. And so as we look at a tax structure, how do we help those folks, right? So if you're going to rent a room to a year round, is that something that we should give a benefit to from a tax point of view? On the other side, if there's a burden, is that something we want to do? So these are conversations that the town should have, and the town should be able to have this discussion, whether we want to do that or not. And right now, we can't do that at all.
I think we're making this more complicated than it is. Aren't we out of the gate just asking for the ability to do what other towns already do?
Yeah.
And not having to make the we're special case, which is for us kind of unusual, to be
Yeah.
able to say this is what we're looking for. If we have something else, we'll come back. But I think we tend to, and I'm probably as bad as anyone, lose ourselves in minutia when we just want to know what time it is.
Yeah, at this point, I believe it's 29 communities have either an exception or an exemption from the current state laws. And so we're really looking, as Martha said, to be have the same flexibility that other communities do.
Questions, Alana or Tina, do you have any questions about it at this level?
I guess I would just have one question. Of the 29 towns, are you asking for pretty much similar enabling legislation? Is it pretty uniform?
I believe the language that we put forward last year was identical to Middletown and Newport.
Our language was Block Island
Yes.
or New Shore.
Okay.
And like all of those communities, it's really the local ordinance that spells out the details and the specificity. It's the permission and the flexibility that comes from the state legislation.
Great. Perfect.
It was very challenging last year. I mean, I'll just be frank about it. Why not? Because as I said, the bill did pass the Senate unanimously. We had one particular business owner who retained a lobbyist, and it was the bill was never taken up in the House. So we can give you the background on that, but that it's important to know that at least in our minds, it was not a matter of substance or deep policy concerns that drove this last year. We got down to crunch time in the House, and
Councilman Stover, this is Jeff. Just a quick, just to let everyone know, this is purely, I think it was already mentioned too, that similar to what's in other cities and towns across the state, but it is just enabling act. It puts the power of the council to determine whether or not they want to go forward, or even just to review options on how you set up a tax classification on properties in your municipality. And it would require also a resolution from the council to go forward when the legislation appears before its respective committees. So that would be a step we would request that the council would probably take forth as we see this introduced again this year.
terrific. Thank you, Jeff. That was very helpful. As I was thinking about this meeting with you guys, one of the things we've talked to some leaders in state government about is as challenging sometimes as our size and geographic isolation can be, it also presents some opportunities because we're a bit of, if you will, a lab for ideas, where you don't have to experiment with $100 million. The issue that I think of frequently when I think of this is our housing challenge. We have it's very interesting when you read articles about the housing challenges in Rhode Island. And I think there would be a tendency on the mainland to think, oh, Block Island, they're sort of doing their thing. They don't have real challenges. We do. We have tremendous challenges and, real divide in terms of cost. We have a dearth of kind of what is often described as attainable housing. In addition to affordable housing. And we are quite likely to come to you with sort of ideas about how to move the needle on our housing challenges. As I say, sort of the upside of that is that we're often not talking about many millions of dollars to help. We're frequently talking about relatively small amounts of money that move the needle. Now, on the housing topic, the state has actually been very responsive to our Affordable Housing Board. And we have a significant new project that is in I guess it's sort of beyond planning, but I'll say in planning. Both of you have seen the West Side 20 and the other affordable housing project that we have on the west side. Sort of, Senator, if you remember, kind of across the street from our fabulous playground over on the west side. Right, exactly. This is supposed to be bright and optimistic. Not necessarily
Beside our historic
It's across the
cemetery.
playground. That is, Marianne, is that 16 units planned right
Yeah,
now?
it's 16 units. It's 8 built and 16 units, and 2 will be ADA compliant. What I can do is we have also applied for funding with Rhode Island Housing just in the past 10 days. I can forward you the link that has all the information regarding this project to the both of you now that I think it. So I'll do that, send that link to the both of you. So at least you have that and see what we're going forward with.
Part of the reason that this project is so important is that it's a bit of a shift in models for us because it's largely rental, potentially exclusively rental. That has been a real need here. Our Affordable Housing Board has done an extraordinary job over literally decades with affordable home ownership projects. We have a number of them. I think we've shown them to both of you. But one of the real gaps has been rentals, and the lack of rentals is one of the things that is a major contributing factor to what you hear about the Block Island shuffle, where people are moving twice a year from rental to rental to rental to rental to rental, and no housing security or stability. So I'm very optimistic about this project and what it's going to do in terms of providing some families and individuals with a real sense of security around their housing. In addition, up by the school, there's a piece of property that we call the Thomas property. That property has some existing housing on it, including the house that the town manager and her family live in. We have plans for 4 new units there. The interesting thing about that project is that the priority for those units goes to town employees. As you can imagine, one of the, you have sort of the basic human challenge when it comes to housing, of housing security and all that. But then we have an additional challenge that really doesn't exist anywhere else in the state. And that is, in order to have a functioning town government, we have to have employees who have safe and affordable housing. You can't commute here, as as you know, Tina. Um, so that project too is very exciting. Anybody want to follow up on the housing conversation? No?
As a complete
Yes.
aside, I just want to say that I substitute taught in the second grade the other day, and we were talking about nomadic people. And one of the children got the concept and told me that she was a nomadic people, because they live on a boat in the summer and they live in a different apartment every winter. So, and then, I was like, okay, well, how many of you are nomadic people? And 3 of the kids raised their hands. So I guess, I'm not making light of it. It was kind of cute.
No,
I loved that they got the concept, right? That was the important part there. But it just goes to show what we're dealing with.
it's actually incredibly touching, really moving, actually. And the story worth keeping. I may borrow that. I'm going to pretend that I was a substitute teacher in the second grade. Just want, are you following up on housing?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
The one, I just want to echo a little bit about town employees, because as Keith mentioned, it's hard to have a functioning government. This includes teachers. So, when we were recruiting for teachers this past year, we were very fortunate, but it's really tough to hire a teacher in the state and say, oh yeah, by the way, we really don't have any place for you to live. So good luck. And, and that is a huge impediment. Medical center, huge impediment to having the proper staff. So it's not just, and I don't mean this the wrong way, in the building of the town government, it is teachers, it is doctors, it is nurses, it is aides, down the line. And that's really critical, and why this effort, especially the Thomas property and a few others, are very, very.
Yeah, that I'm glad you raised that, because one of the things I didn't mention but should have is that we are one of the few towns that is actually over 10%. So it's something that you hear the fights back and forth around affordable housing that occur not just in Rhode Island, but across the country. And here you have a town that is committed as one of its central issues, affordable housing. So often it's sort of, oh, we don't want that project. It's it ends up being kind of a NIMBY conversation. But there's a community sense of purpose, I think, on this issue that doesn't exist in a lot of places.
So just a couple questions.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're developing 20 new units based on what you just told me. Do you guys have an assessment of how many units you would think that you would need for your town employees and or individuals that are nomadic on the island? Do we have any data to support what you might need?
Well, so I was the Affordable Housing Board would have numbers, right? Because they have
Yeah.
a list.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I mean, I don't think we have that list, but
They have numbers, and what is certainly true is that while we all want to see how this new housing gets absorbed, that doesn't take away from needing an ongoing effort on housing. You know what I mean? I think if we're guilty of anything, it's of being episodic when it comes to housing, as opposed to sort of keeping it front of mind all the time. So the answer probably is a number of 1-bedroom rentals will be very important. But what that doesn't take care of is young families that need 2 bedrooms, or one of the things that we talk about a lot is that we actually have affordable housing lock-in, if you will, where there's not in any way sort of a way to move up and through affordable housing, where you go from the 1-bedroom apartment to the 2-bedroom or you go from the small home ownership to a more moderately priced. We just don't have the infrastructure, or frankly, the money to make that happen. So we have to be constantly revisiting the model, and I give Mary Ann and the Affordable Housing Board and the housing advocates a lot of credit for focusing on rentals for this next project, because that clearly is a need. But there's going to be a different need when when those projects come online.
Keith, can I jump
Okay,
in really
please.
quickly here? So what you see in a lot of other communities, and I lived in Jamestown before coming out here, and although Jamestown has probably run into similar things, people start at the affordable housing level. Then after a period of time, they're eligible or they're capable of buying their own home, and therefore the stock or the inventory
Turns
becomes
over.
available. What's unique here, and what's explained to me by Cindy Pappas, who heads up Housing Board, which was an aha moment for me. She said, what we have here is someone will buy an affordable housing, maybe as a young adult, but they're there through their whole life. So
Right.
that stock will be tied up for 50 to 60 years. You don't have the turnover. And that's really problematic. And it was a really aha moment for me, because the stock, the inventory is stagnant. It doesn't turn over. So what we provide today for someone will not be available or turn over for 50 to 60 years.
Right.
And that, you don't see that in other communities as much.
And there's a couple of other pieces of this. I think the first housing out here was the rental that nobody even thinks about anymore, which is over in the New Harbor as well. And when they were building it, people said, well, that's never going to be filled, or people aren't going to, it's not going to work. And it's been full ever since it was built. And then they went over, people all thought they wanted home ownership and then decided they didn't, or it wasn't realistic. One of the problems that we also have, well, it's been alluded to already by both Keith and Mary Ann, with the no middle ground. And that wasn't the other thing I was going to say. I've already lost my train of thought. This happens.
I'm glad
a
I'm not the only
lot.
one.
Oh man, what was it?
We can come back to it. It's
It wasn't the rentals. Oh, it was in fact that what's so important about having something like the rentals, or having the housing board. And we were lucky. The year we got the housing board was one of those years upstate when housing was hot. It was like 20 years ago, and nobody even questioned it. We just went through like that. We thought we were going to be up there for a fight, and it just got passed. It was kind of bizarre. Glad it did. But we always talk about places having housing for their employees. The thing about that is you end up having housing that's tied to a job. And that's great as long as you've got the employee in the job. But you also it's almost like the company store. I mean, it's not as insidious, certainly, but it's the same concept of that, really locking people into something. And sometimes people don't want to be locked in. So it's really important to have things like what the Affordable Housing Board is working on.
we're assuming, or hoping, as I think you are, Tina, and you are, Senator, that this change in leadership around housing will have an impact. Though I have to say, Josh Saul was very responsive to the kind of conversation that we're having now. It just never materialized into any kind of programmatic or financial support. But Jeff and Rick have been incredibly helpful, both to us and to the Affordable Housing Board, at putting us in front of state leaders. But we you should expect to hear from us as as we
Yeah.
as we go through that process. Because again, sort of back to the square peg round hole, it may well be that some of the programmatic things they do don't really fit here. So we're going, we may need someone to kind of shake that tree for us, if you will.
Yeah, so that's absolutely something I've heard from pretty much every town that I represent. So Block Island, Charlestown, South Kingstown, and West.
But Block Island is the most important one
Yeah,
that you've heard
of
from.
course.
Yeah,
I'm your
okay,
only
I
representative.
just wanted to
Um,
clarify.
But I reached out to Stefan Fryer, who's now the new housing czar. And we've exchanged emails. We'll continue to, I'll keep you abreast of my conversations with him.
Wonderful.
You coordinate with me the information that you want shared, and I'm happy to carry that forward.
Great. I did want to spend a few minutes on an area that I know you're both passionate about, and I think we are too. And that is around human services. You can, one of the steps that we're taking, with that is a significant development, is that we are moving toward a full-time human services person in our town government. And that is both to recognize and ramp up some of the direct involvement that the town has with the full range of human services needs. And also, frankly, to recognize that my own opinion, and that's worth less than a cup of coffee. My own opinion is that we have been a bit out of the loop in terms of programmatic and financial support that we can get for some of our human services needs. And that ranges, from seniors all the way down to babies, and runs the whole gamut. So we have had real heroes doing human services work, both for the town and for community institutions. But we have a rapidly aging population. Shocker. This is probably something you hear in every meeting and on every Zoom call from towns like ours, but we have a rapidly aging population. We have an aging population that just like people in other towns want to do everything they can to age in place. So we have significant needs there that are, in all honesty, we could probably take the entire 4% increase we're able to do in the levy and commit it to whatever senior services and still not, probably do everything that we want or need to do. So, there's got to be a moment here where we are more engaged with state government on some of these human services needs, be they seniors or across the waterfront, and also sort of as I was saying about housing, don't assume, and not that you would, but don't let people assume that we don't have exactly the same problems that are being faced in communities all over the state, and that runs from opioid issues to early learning issues to like you name it, we have it here by and large. We have a small town and a small town government that very much views these things as important, but has limited resources to address them. For example, our library has been an essential part, in a way, of our human services delivery. our medical center is, does things that probably don't happen in other towns in terms of providing infrastructure for people with mental health issues, for example, and seniors who have needs, et cetera. So that's not necessarily an ask. It's just, I know that you both have a lot of passion on those ideas. And frankly, I know in your case, Tina, I don't know in Alana's case, you have professional experience in this regard. So we're going to need you, I guess, is the easiest way to say that.
If I could just respond to that for a
Please.
moment, if that's okay. So in hearing you speak, I wish that I could remember who it was that said this to me. I don't know if it was in the meeting with the medical center on Block Island, or if it was maybe a member from the senior advisory committee. But one of the things that really resonated with me is the idea of just ensuring that whenever we are formulating a statewide plan for something, that Block Island is part of the state. And that, that there is that understanding that if we're creating a statewide plan for, certified community behavioral health centers that make sure we're servicing all of Rhode Island, that your town is part of Rhode Island. And we need to make sure that there's the provision for services built in. If we're talking about expansion of pre-K seats, same thing. Senior services, same thing. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to look at, for the different pieces of those things that I've been involved with, statewide paratransit services for seniors and people with disabilities. What's the plan for Block Island that's going to be built into that? And so I think just kind of to what you're saying, that's, making sure that those connections are being made so that in all of those different areas, whatever direction we're trying to move to improve things for the rest of the state, that you guys are included. And I don't know that that's historically always been the case.
100%. Martha would be happy even if they would just include on the map of the state of Rhode Island, Block Island.
Baby
I was going to mention
Yeah.
that.
She's right, by the way.
And I, just to add to what Alana just said, keeping in mind too, that I think a lot of the time why we get dropped is we're not as easy to service, right? So if they have a program where they send someone out to a community, it's a giant pain in the neck to come here, and it's expensive, and there's weather conditions, and there's cancellations. And so I think a lot of time it's just more expedient to not include us. And then if they don't hear from us, they're like, oh, good, they didn't even notice. I think that is genuinely the tack that people take. And so I appreciate that you're looking into that and kind of keeping us on. I think part of the reason why we end up screaming all the time and being like, well, we know we're different and we need this exception is just for that reason. So I guess part of like looking into it and making sure we're included is also working into the plan that there might be more needed here to get here or to provide for here. It's not going to be as cost efficient.
Definitely. And just as an example of that, one of the issues that I am working on is that idea of the statewide paratransit services. And in the study that RIPTA did, whereas in other communities, they might be deploying, actual RIPTA vehicles, the provision in the study they did that I'm hoping to work this session to be able to actually implement is that, they specifically spelled out that on Block Island, they would contract with taxi services locally to provide that service, because that would be, something that would be different. And whether or not that's actually going to play out or how that might play out would require obviously input from your town. But I think that your point is well taken, that it's not always going to look the same, but it should help to achieve that same end goal.
We had a warm chuckle about that because that's what we do. And we use the taxi drivers who are available to provide a lot of these services. Alana.
Sort of wrapping back to the whole we're out here in the ocean piece. I've always lived here, and I remember we used to have our own representatives, and then we were lumped in with Westerly, and then we've kind of gradually been moved back over toward Galilee and Narragansett. or to Narragansett. But some of the conversations I used to have with people from Westerly, they weren't really a whole lot more connected to the Providence than we were, unless they had a couple of real movers and shakers over there. But otherwise, you get the feeling that people, I mean, I had a friend whose kids went to Hendricken. They'd been to Europe, but they'd never been to Westerly or Block Island. And it was a foreign universe. I want to bring up something that's totally off this topics we've been talking about here. And this is more, I think, are you Narragansett as well as just Elena?
I am, yes, Narragansett and the coast of North Kingstown.
But Tina, you,
Charlestown, Westerly, South Kingstown, and Block Island.
okay. Because we talk, there's a lot of conversation out here about sea rise and all that. And I watch the news and I see how bad the mainland gets in a way that, we honestly don't. We're never replenishing beaches or anything. It happens naturally. But the thing that really concerns me, and it's not going to happen, I doubt it's going to happen in my lifetime, is Galilee is going to be underwater long before Block Island is. And, that's our portal. And if we don't have Galilee, we have to go to Quonset. I mean, my God, that's north of the tower, I think. We don't want to do that.
You don't.
But it's a very,
And we were joking about the Hendricken person, by the way.
it's well, it's but I haven't been to Europe either, so there. That's just something that I feel like we go off and sort of run past and get out of Galilee before it floods again. And it has, and I know they've got studies, and URI is always doing a study on sea rise. It seems like every few years they turn one out about Narragansett. I remember Governor Almond had a whole, we're going to redo Galilee plan. But that's something that, really has to not get lost. And they rebuilding over there in places I remember being underwater, for gosh sakes. I'm old. The collective memory is, I think, better out here than over there. And I know they've been doing work over there, but it's still, they were more underwater than we were in that last big storm just before Christmas.
Yeah, you saw that king tide before Christmas. That was a little concerning for people who need to rely on the ferry.
Martha, you done?
I'm done. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
No, and Martha brings up a really important point that I think we've mentioned to you both privately, but I want to make sure it's very apparent. We have two lifelines to the mainland, and one is Westerly Airport. There's been a whole lot of dialogue around issues around the Westerly Airport and flight plans and trees. I mean, we're not going to get into that. The other is the ferry, and whether it's somebody who needs a life flight out that day, we have more flights than you'd like to think, not just in the summer, but even in the winter. And thinking about the ferry, and I can't overemphasize the importance of Westerly Airport and Point Judith to Block Island. And without those, and even in bad storms for 3 or 4 days, it causes some major tensions, especially if there are health issues and somebody's got to get to a hospital, or if there are other issues. And I just wanted to build on Martha's point, because whether it's flooding or trees, you shorten a runway, that could start to have major impacts, or you don't have a dock to go to. Yep. And I just want to make sure you are both I can't overemphasize the importance of those two.
So I can just weigh in. That's been some of my preliminary work as a representative to work on coastal issues. And I am working with some colleagues in the House, and Senator DeMario, I don't know if she wants to speak to this, but we spoke a little bit about some issues. So we don't have legislation. We haven't crafted a plan, but it is on our radar. There are many coastal communities that are very much at risk, and we need to do some planning around that.
Yeah. So from human services to state police. Marianne reminded me that we need to talk about state police, because we're getting to that point in the year. I mean, I know seems like summer's a long time away, but for us, it's basically right in front of us. Marianne, I don't know whether you want to talk about it. I would just say, sort of, as we've said on a couple of other issues, expect to hear from us. One of the things that I think the five of us expect to do, and I'm sure Marianne, is to keep you in the loop from the very beginning of these conversations this year. And we have a new chief. That's right.
So that's what I was going to start off. We did hire a new chief, so we have a new chief who will be starting mid-month. And I think you're aware of what we went through last year. We got on the state police. We're looking to have the same two state police return to our community like we did last year. I think they came out Memorial Day week, and then the colonel asked, he said, I'm hearing that the next couple of weekends things are relatively quiet because it was cost to the state police. Can they not have state troopers come out then? And we were amenable to that. Any state agency will work with, whether it's DEM, RIDA, state police, a RIPTA, quasi-governmental agency that doesn't quite fall under you, but they're our partners, so we do need to work with them. During the discussion last year when this all came up and when it came time for the budget hearing, Colonel Manny at that point said we did not budget the funding for two state police on Block Island. So we're not sure what happened in this budget that was presented. We're hoping that Colonel Weaver did put in there the budget for two state troopers out here on the island for this year. So as you delve into the budget a little bit, and I haven't looked at the budget, governance budget in detail also, I looked at high level state aid, both local and education, as to whether or not those individuals or those funds were budgeted for it. And if they weren't, then we need to start having a conversation similar to what we had last year as to how that funding can be made available. And I have not reached out to the colonel yet requesting those state troopers until we did receive that budget and that information. So that's something we really, as Keith said, we do need to jump on that sooner than later.
We do not want that situation to devolve the way that it did. We're the state,
well-
that was never about police. And it's just not it's not a situation we want to be in again. Just
Completely
isn't.
avoidable. I will
Yeah.
find out through our fiscal team. We will determine whether or not it's in the budget, and if it isn't, then certainly we'll make the request that it's included. Question, do you have housing for the state troopers?
We
Okay.
provide housing every single year.
Okay.
We've been doing that since for the past 25 years.
So I have just a couple more things we have. Just to get off of issues for a second, one of the things that we have spoken at length with Jeff Taylor and Rick McAuliffe about is hosting a Block Island event for legislators. We believe that to see it and to feel it, not on the 4th of July, would have great value. I think we could absolutely find someone to host something like that, where you could bring like-minded colleagues and potentially leaders, one hopes, just to see. I think the two of you have seen that sort of the real town is quite different than what the perception might be. And we would really very much appreciate that opportunity, whether, fall, spring, kind of off season a little bit, where we can show people the housing, show people our infrastructure, show people our fire barn, our energy co-op. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. It's not a story without its challenges. So please think about that. I know Jeff and Rick have also been thinking about it, but we would very much like to do that. And as we have said before, you have 5 people and a town manager who are happy, to the extent that ferries working, who are happy almost at the drop of a hat to come to Providence and talk about things and to support you and to make our case. We are not, I certainly am not sort of, hey, here's a list. Would you work on this and let us know how it goes? We're prepared to do the work with you. And actually enjoy doing that and enjoy raising the profile of our town in Providence. We have a number of large capital projects, both sort of underway, in the pipeline and notional that you should be aware of. First and foremost, and most sort of most front of mind is a $10.5 million school construction project. I believe over half of which is a new HVAC system. Right? Yeah, more than half is an HVAC system and a number of other things. I'm going to confess as a layman that I cannot for the life of me figure out how these things get reimbursed by the state or how that all works. Fortunately, Marianne and Amy understand it as professionals. But as you can imagine, a $10.5 million project in a town of 1,200 people is not an insignificant capital expenditure. And while there's no direct ask there, I would just sort of ask for your attention as we move through that project.
Yeah, but I think more to the point, which is why we have Marianne and Amy. This is another case where we're at the bottom of the funding list. And we are, if you look at the numbers, statewide formulas, that's the way it's going to come out. And it's very hard to say, oh, Providence shouldn't be getting as much money as it is, and we should be getting more, because you can't take the valuations in Providence, the tax rates in Providence. But then we have the reality of if we're going to be a viable year-round community. And that's the hardest part. If I lived on the mainland, I probably would feel very differently about it too. We're not one of those places we can drive somewhere else. If you lose the school, just as a community resource, you've lost you've lost the town. And I have lived here my entire life, and I have spent most of my adult life, at least, listening to people say there aren't going to be any kids in school next year. And I think maybe next year there really aren't many in kindergarten, but a few years after that, we're back to normal. And this is what always happens. So there will, I'm not convinced that school's going to close for lack of students tomorrow or next year or 5 years from now. But that is probably the most dramatic example of how funding and statistics work against us. And the percentage of our budget that goes to schools is how much? Which is a third, which is like a flip of the mainland. It's very low compared to the mainland. It used to be, at least. I mean, we used to be 20 to 40 to 20 to 80, and the mainland was the other way around. But anyhow, that's just yet another. We don't fit in any categories.
In terms of other capital projects, we have, I know, Representative, you're going to be seeing this afternoon. We have a desperate need for a new infrastructure for fire, police, public safety. To give you some sense, Marianne kicked me under the table. I think we've spent $100,000 in the last year to keep the front of the building from falling off, basically.
Yeah, but unfortunately with the fire facility, the size of the new vehicles that are coming, we just don't meet them. So what we had to do was make some infrastructure repairs for the garage. And once we got into looking at it, we obviously had to make some structural improvements in order for the garage to continue opening, closing, because the new fire vehicle that we bought did not fit. So we had to raise the garage and flip it up. So clearly the facility we have is not a 21st century facility. In so much as the size and the structure of the building, because of the vehicles that are now coming out in the pike. So that project is a high priority that we start addressing that facility. And also, the oxygen tanks and things like that we don't have something where we could put that stuff inside and a refill and things like that. So it's definitely not a 21st century facility by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's arguably not a facility that it was appropriate in the 70s, but there's
Late 60s.
yeah, late 60s.
It was actually built, I think, in the
I know,
70s. but-
that's, yeah. I was trying to pick the right decade. And then, Sven can take over another notional project that is in the planning stage is a harbors facility. And I want Sven to talk about it, but before I do, when we talk about housing, we have a new highway facility that is going to be built that will have housing. That'll be the building itself will be funded by RIDOT, but the housing is going to be in all likelihood our responsibility. But we're happy to take that. The medical center project will have housing associated with it. The fire barn, as it's been in planning, the public safety complex, as it's been in planning, will have housing associated with it. So, again, sort of, we're not like everybody else. Literally every public expenditure we make, we look at as an opportunity to do something about our housing challenge. It has struck me more than once that might be an interesting angle with the ARPA money that's going to be going into housing to help fund some of those capital expenditures we're making for other government uses to include housing. Just a thought that I've had in passing. So, Sen?
Sure. I think you all have been to the fire barn, police station, rescue squad, what we call now the first responder complex. And by all means, that is sort of the number one priority, I think, for the town. We need to get that up and make sure that we're really focused on that. Another effort based on some land that was acquired by the town last year is what we call a maritime center, and the goal is to enhance and increase the access for all of the residents. Right now, it's hard to launch a boat at times. It's hard to get access into the pond. And so one goal is to gain access into the pond for residents. The second goal is to have facilities for boaters. And I know some of you have spent time on the pond, and you know that trying to get water into a jug and holding onto a piling, or walk to the beach house, beach pavilion to take a shower, those are pretty large asks. And so the goal is to support New Harbor. And this is a big project. So it is in the works right now. We're going to be, I think, talking about appropriations. We're going to be trying to look for different ways to fund this, but really federal appropriation, excuse me. But really it's a goal about residents and people on the island getting better access, which I think both of you are working on in different ways as far as beach access. And then secondly is really supporting the harbor and bringing capabilities, again, back the 21st century capabilities like a shower and a bathroom to those people who are in the harbor during the season. So that's sort of where that stands.
Great. One other thing that I wanted to mention, and actually Rick McAuliffe told us yesterday that you actually, Tina, have co-sponsored a bill on this, but these sort of electric, non-registered electric vehicles, whether they're electric bikes with throttles, or what did we decide they were, hoverboards or scooters, or we are what appears to be in our town kind of inundated with these things, and there is no regulatory hook that we've been able to discover. That's not to say there isn't. We're working on that. But it's, I guess I would just plant in your heads the need that we have, and I'm sure others of your towns have, to give municipalities regulatory flexibility when it comes to those, including, saying you can't have them in this part of our town, and in our case, sort of in the category of twice shy, we also probably don't want someone to spring up in town, with 100 of these things to rent, so we have a deep and abiding interest in that issue. That goes beyond merely sort of making sure they're registered and what have you. We will want tools, because we will be the canary in a coal mine for those sorts of vehicles. I think we already are. Martha, wouldn't you agree, Molly? And in fact, I always, as I said earlier, I'm never afraid to steal someone else's story. But when Matt Moynihan, our former chief, left, one of the things that he said to my colleague Sven as he was leaving is that these unlicensed, what amount to unlicensed and unregistered motor vehicles, are one of the things that keep him awake at night. They're a tragedy waiting to happen. We already have a substantial traffic issue, both from cars and mopeds, and the idea of layering on and we've seen it over the last couple of summers, really, wouldn't you say, Martha?
I would say that. And there's something else I just want to throw out there, because I know it's one of those things that people say without thinking about it. And it would be like my dream world is get rid of anything on two wheels on the front street, which horrifies people. And I say, well, you can't get rid of the vehicles. You can't get rid of the cars because the landing is on the front street. You can walk a bicycle on the front street. And I know other places, other towns, other states do have regulatory things like that in their downtown districts. But I work downtown in the summertime, and I'm in a place where I just see the herds of bicycles and the I call it melee of mopeds, and we now have scooters, motorized scooters weaving in and out, and these one-wheeled things, and skateboards that might or might not be motorized. I can't even tell. And it's just getting to be, and I think we've all seen 8 bicycles come together in a heap after they've blown through a stop sign, and by the grace of God, they're all young and nobody gets hurt. But it really is, it's a very short time, but it's not getting any better. And as I said, that the landing is there, that we have to deal with that fact. That's just there. So this fantasy of, oh, let's not have cars out here, which I'm sure you'll hear from people, is just a fantasy.
So I think this is something, Alana, you and I talked about when you were out here back in the spring. Because you said that in Narragansett, they were having the same difficulty with electric bicycles. So
Yes.
obviously this is on your radar, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's, yeah, there are kind of all levels of issues of it, from the question of where are they allowed and not allowed. So here on the mainland, a big question is whether or not they're allowed on bike paths. And if so, are only certain classes or certain speeds allowed on bike paths? I think there's the question of age of operator, depending on what the speed capacity is for the certain bike, scooter, et cetera, that we're talking about, because right now that's also not really regulated at all. And then just the piece overall about whether or not municipalities can regulate them. They're new, so there just isn't, there isn't any structure for that yet. So I think just kind of on all levels, from where are they allowed, who can use them. I think all of those things need to be looked at. And I believe Representative Spears, is it Representative Kislak's bill that, yes, okay.
Exactly.
And I believe that does have a Senate companion. It's not my bill, but I do believe that there is somebody who's going to be introducing that on my side as well, to be able to continue that.
That municipal flexibility is an essential part of this from our perspective. And I say this, I should have said full disclosure. I have an electric bike, and I think it is like the greatest invention in the history of bicycles. It's fabulous, but it's not one of the ones with a throttle.
Right.
There's a real bright line among these things. It's interesting.
The one-
Well, and I was just going to say, I think to, just kind of to that, I also don't, I would like to be able to figure out how to get ahead of this, because I think they are a wonderful tool, and I think they are a wonderful alternative, for a lot of different things, but I don't want there to develop such a large amount of problems with them that then people just want to ban them entirely, or that they, people don't want them around. So
That's really well put, Senator.
If I can, Senator, and to both of you, speed and lack of enforceability is the critical issue. Right now, the police can't really stop them. I mean, because there's nothing to stop them against. And so you get into this big problem of, well, I don't have a hat. I'm potentially driving erratically, and I may be going, 25 miles an hour among stopped cars. Well, they can't do much. So while I wish we could get ahead of it, I think the question is, how do we claw our way back up into the front? Because right now, timing is pretty important. So thank you for that.
Have I missed anything, guys? Yeah, go ahead, Marianne, please.
Yeah, we touched on it briefly. Keith, you brought up, and I thought you were going to say a little more about this. We did talk about the partnership with state agencies and stuff like that, and getting folks out here and telling our story, and they see, and we did that. We did that with RIDA, and Director Avavidi assigned Pam Carter, and she came out with some staff. The end result of that was that RIDA has committed $20 million to Block Island for the new highway facility. It's a state-owned facility, and also the road work. So when we do get the state officials to come out so we can tell our story, they clearly recognize it. So that's why I'm saying we're working with DEM now. We'll continue with RIDA. So we really need to continue that relationship with the state agencies and have them come out, because we'll tell them our stories and they'll see the need that is out here. So I just want to get out that RIDA we worked with and did, secure $20 million of funding.
That's amazing. That's great. And I know Senator DeMario and myself have both spoke with Director Samini, and I know she does have on her agenda to come out here to talk about many of the health and human service issues, primarily facing the elder community, but we should try and pair that potentially with somebody from DHS so we can talk through the spectrum. But yeah, absolutely. Anything that we can do to facilitate having our state agency leads come to your community just as they do every other community, we will absolutely help with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I should apologize now in retrospect for the laundry list nature of this, but there's no other way to learn about sort of what the needs are than to tell you what the needs are, and we don't expect you to, march into the appropriations room and actually, yeah.
Yes, we do.
That's a very good, actually. And appreciate your listening. Is there anything else? Is anybody?
The only other
Yes.
thing that I just wanted to jump in with is, and you guys were touching on this when you were referencing, the federal appropriations versus state, for certain things. But I think the other thing that Representative Spears and I can potentially be helpful with is facilitating any of those connections, with our federal delegation, floating up to them or to their staff, questions about, is there federal money for this? How do the municipalities access that directly? Is that something that's going to flow through the states? Obviously, Block Island has a new congressman as well. And, I know he is very eager to hear about local issues and how to support those. And, a lot of that is going to be financially. And, some of it is advocacy, but some of it is also just really accessing the things that already exist
Yes.
that sometimes I think we don't know about, that could potentially be applicable to different projects. So, if there's any facilitation or advocacy that, we can help do on that, or connections to make, I'm happy to do that as well.
Terrific.
On that point, I think working with Jeff and Rick on getting not just the federal, but also, like Keith mentioned, some of the senior folks in the Senate and the House out here, I think is probably the number one goal I would have. Just the more people that are out here, then they see it, and it's not just that 4th of July or fun boat ride and a great time in the summer. It's a real community that has community needs. So thanks for helping with that and helping Jeff and Rick.
Molly, anything else? Martha?
Well, I just want to say that, we have a couple of people here from senior advisory, but they'd been, Sandy, you specifically were talking about the bus, right? So I'm kind of glad to hear that what you're talking about is paying for taxis, because I think the presentation we had from RIDOT last year was really not what we needed here at all. But I think this sounds like a better option, but I think Sandy could speak to that better.
Yes, Sandra Kelly, Mohegan Trail. The last time we met, both of you were running for election, and I'm happy the two of you won because I think we have excellent representation, and I really appreciate your efforts. We've met a couple of times. We've had conversations, Zoom meetings with the senator, and I'm so happy they had a para transit meeting at RIPTA. And I believe the transportation system we have for our seniors was brought to their attention. And we're hoping, basically, as Martha said, to get to the just punchline, is that Block Island receives some funds because of the fact that we cannot, we're not attached to the mainland. We can't use the services of their buses and things like of that sort. But, we are part of the state, and our senior citizens and those challenged people that need a ride from time to time deserve it. So I thank you. I know it's already in the works, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandy. Pat, did you want to talk about anything? You're welcome to if you'd like.
I'm on the school board and other
Can you just
committees.
introduce yourself for?
Pat Doyle, full-time resident and a school committee member, and Old Harbor Task Force, so other things, and very much a supporter of our senior program. You talked about housing and also the needs of education, the cost of education. We have about 30 employees in our school community. As I look at that group of employees, many of them have are approaching, many have already approached retirement age. So we're bringing in new people to the schools. So we want the best in the math program and the foreign language and whatever, as if any other community does. But overlying our interviews and our recruitment is, what do we do about housing for people who don't like the idea of coming out here you might be able to get a rent, but then you have to leave, sometimes even before the school year is ended or begins. It really is it's a pressure on perhaps who you may choose for the job. That's the case. Or who is going to stay here. And the beginning stages of new staff, whether they be in the school or the town hall, is the first year. We put a lot of time into their training and getting them to be part of the group. And when they leave after a year or 2 years, I'd like to look at some of those statistics because it doesn't serve us well. And the other thing with the school is we are often locked out of programs that we're judged on. And one of the star ways of judging how schools are doing is attendance. Another one is school programs at the high school level that involve kids in training for the trades. We're really locked out of that because our kids can't. We do things, however, to try to compensate for that. We get no extra money, like maybe an internship program. But we have, as one of our members said the other day, we had an interesting meeting, but she said there are nuances in educating kids in the Block Island school and having parents be part of it and responding to their needs, that I think the conversation is very important for us to access services, if not maybe the service, maybe the funding for our services, such as in the area of trade development for our students. And the last education point that I saw in the governor's budget, there's not a significant amount, I think it was 112 million, looking at more preschool, mandatory preschool. And we do have a preschool, but many of the families who would qualify, who really need this program, it's a fairly hefty dollar amount for them to go to the school. And unless we can get perhaps some philanthropists to pay for the $4,000 or $5,000 for a 2 or 3-year-old, we don't have that. And to have a level playing field for children who may be coming into the school with a foreign language background, we don't have a preschool that we could try to get them into. And what the mainland can do is if you can't get your program in Chepachet, you can go to the next larger town. That's allowed, you know, that we look broadly. We don't, the geographic isolation hurts education. And so I think a couple of things we are looking at in the school, more grants, we're looking at attendance and how issues are related to our geographic isolation. And so we would welcome any input from you of knowledge of something that may go on at the state level for funding or programs, not just state, but perhaps foundation or federal funding that we may not know about in the school. Thank you.
That was great stuff, Pat. Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Representative Spears, thank you so much. You know, I can't say that enough or effusively enough. This was, thank you for making the time, but it also, I think, was a really worthwhile hour and a half. Please, please don't fail to reach out to us to tell us how we can help you as you're working on these issues. I just would really like to leave you with that. I think it's true probably of people who serve in municipal government across your districts, but I will say especially here, you have a council and a town that is very willing to engage and help as you fight for us. We have a pretty we have a community that's often very prepared to fight for stuff. So we're happy to do that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have anything further? A motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Great to see you all and continue to reach out at any time.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Keith.
And Representative Spears, I just wanted to flag for you that the matter that we talked about right at the very beginning, I can actually just send you a link to what was submitted last year in the Senate. So if you wanted to just duplicate that on your side regarding the tax structure enabling legislation.
Thank you.
Great.